Hello, everyone. How are we doing?
Hello, hello.
Hello. It is webinar time, and we're excited. We were on the practice session before here, just kind of like getting hyped up. So hopefully everybody comes to match the energy because we love it when it just feels like one big community and we're all laughing in the chat. So I'm hoping we kind of live up to that hype. We have a really exciting session today. We'll give it a couple more minutes before we dive into it, but we have Chloe, who I think this is your first webinar, right?
First, popping my nonsensical webinar cherry today, guys. So nice,
Yes.
nice to see everyone, even though I can't see you. I feel the
Yes.
energy.
The group is here and we're here to support. So I've turned on the chat capabilities, I think. So can the people that are here, can you just pop in a little hello just to make sure it works? Yay. Okay, I'm seeing it. I see some of you guys are only messaging the host and panelists. So if you hover over that little blue thing, you can change it to talk to everybody, just so that you're able to chat while we're chatting and just kind of jump in where you feel like you want to. So we are here to talk about content ideas. And Chloe is our creative brain, one of our many creative brains, but she is an amazing account manager. We'll do a bit of an intro in a second, but I just kind of wanted to do a bit of housekeeping up front while we wait for more people to join. This is our monthly webinars. We do this every month. If you have to hop off at any point, or if you know people that weren't able to join, we do always record this and we send it out via email. This will be coming out tomorrow. The chat function is working. So if you haven't said hi already and you're joining now, please say hi. And we will also be using the Q&A function. So if you have a specific question, please pop it in there, just because it allows us to kind of monitor it a bit more. It says, okay, this has been answered and etc. It just helps us because there's a lot of people here and we want to make sure that we're getting to as many of them as possible. So this helps us do that. While we're waiting, can everybody please let us know what talk you're sitting in at the moment before we jump in? I think that's always a nice little icebreaker. Chloe, what talk are you in right now?
Oh my goodness, exposing myself here. I am a newly Formula One fan. So I am very much immersed in Formula One talk. I say Formula One talk, it's like Formula One driver talk. I'm there for the pretty men, and the racing is just a bonus. So that's where I sit.
I love that. That is so good. I am currently in, well, I feel like I've been in it before, but I am recently back in Taylor Swift talk because I'm going to the concert this weekend. So I'm seeing all the Swifties outfits, all of the friendship bracelets, and I'm so excited. So if anybody else is going to any Taylor Swift concert, I feel ya because I'm just buzzing with excitement.
The hype is real.
Amazing. Yes. So I see that some people are in British YouTuber talk. That's fun. Yep. Charles Leclerc. There you go.
There we are.
Make the pretty face. We love that. Amazing. So what we're going to do today is talk about how to build scalable content ideas. Chloe, as I mentioned before, is one of our star account managers, and she is joining us today because she has one of the most creative brains that I've ever seen, and she is behind some of our clients that we're really, really proud about. So I'll let her introduce herself properly now.
Thank you so much. Gosh, what an intro. But hi, everyone. I'm Chloe. I'm Senior Account Manager here at Nonsensical. And my background is kind of in content creation and social media management. So if you couldn't tell from the accent, I moved to the UK from Australia about 5 years ago and started working at a social media agency, but just kind of felt a bit of like a jack of all trades and master of none. And I was like, right, I need to niche down. I don't I don't operate on Twitter. I can't pretend to know how to post there for brands, but I do live and breathe on TikTok. So I'm found my way at Nonsensical, and yeah, I'm now senior account manager, and I've just had like the genuine pleasure of working with brands like Marks and Spencer, Go.Compare, Interflora, Tonight Josephine, to name a few. And yeah, as Melina said, we've done some really exciting creative stuff for them, and all of those learnings that I've taken over kind of like my year and a half here at the business, I'm here to share today. So I'm excited.
Amazing. Yep, we're really excited about this. Just a bit about Nonsensical. If you're new, we are a TikTok specific agency and we help brands get impact on the platform in any way they might need. And we like to put these webinars on once a month just to help all of you understand the platform a bit better, get a bit creative where you can. I know I mean, I wouldn't say it's new, but it's ever changing and it's not the most understood platform. It is really weird and it's really unique, and that's why we love it, but it also makes it a bit difficult for to get fully immersed in it. So that's why we do these webinars. So if you are new, welcome. If you're somebody who's been joining our webinars for a while, welcome back. And we're going to get straight into it. So these are a little bit, this one is a little bit different than some of our more chatty ones. We do have some slides to run through today, but as always, just use the Q&A function throughout. We do have time for just live Q&A at the end, but we will be answering as we go through the slides. So don't feel like you need to hold off until the end. If you're seeing something as we're talking about it, just pop it in there and we will try our best to answer as many as possible. So anything else you would add, Chloe, while I get the slides up on the screen?
No, I think, yeah, the slides are coming from me, guys. So apologies if you're not used to this format, but I'm a very visual learner. So I just thought I would put together a bit of a deck to share with everyone today, just to, I don't know, add some like visual element. And there will be a little bit of audience participation at the start here. So I hope you're all ready for that and are happy to get involved.
Amazing. All right. Let me know when I need to click next, but we're good to go.
Yeah, let's jump straight into the first slide. So I guess to kind of preface today's call, I wanted to start with this really interesting quote, I guess you would call it. And our head of TikTok, Nat, and myself were at Advertising Week in London a few weeks ago, and we went and saw Jamie Lang talk about his podcast production company and how they come up with creative ideas. And he said that he learned from Rory Sutherland that you should never follow the logic, which I absolutely loved. And he said, you should never do that because it takes you to a safe place. So he kind of likened this to if you were going to park your car somewhere, or if you were like building a piece of IKEA furniture, there's like steps and processes that you need to follow that get you to the right place, right? So on TikTok, and when you're creating content for a brand on TikTok, you never want to be following the logic because it takes you to that safe place where everyone else is playing. So in order to really thrive and succeed and stand out, you need to go somewhere completely unexpected with your content. And so I guess that's what we're going to be talking about today, more or less. So if we move on to the next slide here, I've got a bit of a creative exercise for everyone, as I sort of teased before. But one approach that I really love taking when coming up with concepts is instead of thinking about the brand or the product or the service that you're there to sell or to promote, that's always in the back of our minds. I prefer to look at like, what are the themes or, the topics that are really symbolic and really relatable to the audience that you're trying to reach. So as someone who works in social media, and as I'm sure is relatable to a lot of us here today, having a super high screen time is something that's very relatable to me. Like that instantly, if someone talks about like trying to hide their screen time or like it being in the hundreds, been there. Like that is so me. So this is the kind of like sort of starting point that I like to begin all of my ideation. So on to the creative exercise. I'm excited for this. I hope it goes well. Imagine you've been given, oh, sorry, Melina, if we go back one slide. Sorry.
Sorry as well. It is.
Oh, no.
No. There you go. Got it.
Okay, here we go. So I want you all to imagine that you've been given a brief from a cocktail bar. And their selling point is that they are a bar run by bartenders for other bartenders. So their target audience are like people who already have this knowledge about the craft of mixology and creating really fun, quirky cocktails. If you're feeling up for it, in the chat, I would love everyone to drop some ideas or some themes that spring to mind when you think of bartenders and what they might find relatable. So this is not to trip anyone up. It's not a trick question. There's no right or wrong answers, but it's just an exercise to start getting you to think outside the box. That's the goal. So customer convos or complaints, love it. cool equipment and tricks. Oh my God, guys, popping off. I love it. Cocktails, drinks, bars, crazy requests. Love it, love it, love it. These are all, yeah, expertise, helping other people. Cool. Some really common threads that we're seeing. Annoying orders, hacks, shaken, not stirred. Love that, Caitlin. Chatting to people, like Dale says. Amazing. Okay. So these ideas that you guys are populating in the chat right now, they are your starting point. The next step here is to think about how can we turn these like themes or these concepts into an idea that has like a really unique style. So Melina, now if we want to go to the next slide, I want to walk you through, this is my thought process of how we kind of break the logic. So for me, when I think of bartenders, I tend to think about their expertise, right? They all know what they're doing. They can make these really cool drinks at the tip of a hat. If you said surprise me when you went up to order something, they'd come out with something really fabulous. So the logical option or the safe option is probably to think about creating content that shares that expertise. Maybe we ask them to do a little demo on how to create like a sex on the beach or a porn star martini and like film that in the process. But what you have to think about here is that interesting or is it entertaining to bartenders who already know this? Because that's our target audience, right? It's probably not going to be groundbreaking to them. It's probably not going to engage them. Like that's their job. They're on TikTok to sort of escape that life. So watching that is probably not going to be super entertaining. But what is something that is relatable, and I've seen a couple people pop in the chat already, which I love, is this idea that like the customer is always right. Like if you've worked in hospitality, you've had to deal with people who think they know how to do their job better than you. Even in social, we get that sometimes, right? And so how do we refine this pain point and really validate it in a way that's very entertaining to this audience of bartenders? That sort of line of thinking, which I hope you all were able to follow me on, is how we break the logic. It's finding that common theme, that running joke within the industry or kind of the target audience that you're going after and taking it in an unexpected direction. So on the next slide, we've got a bit of a case study. Surprise, surprise. This was a real life brief that we received from a client, the Cocktail Club. And what we did is we took this concept of the customer is always right or having to deal with bartenders. Like imagine serving a bartender a drink, knowing that they know how to make it. And they're probably like, oh, I'd probably do it this way. That was the kind of vibe that they brought to us. So we have our relatable concept. Then we had to think about what's a super engaging format for this. The customer is always right. And where we landed is on the street quizzes, where we went out in London and we asked members of the public how well they really knew cocktails. We showed them alcohol logos and we asked them to guess what the brand was. Some people got it right, a lot of people got it wrong. And what this resulted in is 4 million views across 6 videos. That was our big win from this idea. And we were able to do that because we entertained our audience of bartenders by the incorrect responses from the public. We were then able to engage them as well. Not only did we get a lot of views, but we got a lot of comments because people love to be like, oh, I would have got that. Or I can't believe they didn't know that. Or how could you not know that the bat symbol is Bacardi? It's Batcardi, like, haha. So we generated a lot of engagement. But more importantly, we were able to scale this idea because for every shoot we went on, we interviewed 10, 20 people. And every one of those people, we showed them like 5 logos. So for every one person, theoretically, we were able to create 5 pieces of content, right? We ended up sort of intertwining them together, but that's the kind of scalability that we were also able to produce that kind of helped us really build the brand up on TikTok. So thanks everyone for the participation. That's our little presentation part of today's call. But yeah, now we're gonna like answer some questions, right, Melina? We're gonna have a bit of a chat.
Yes, we are. So this is obviously one of our favorite case studies. It was a fun one to do as well, getting out on the street and stuff like that. But obviously, this style is not necessarily new, right? So how do you kind of balance the act of like getting inspiration from existing content? Like what are some of the methods for adding your own twist? Because again, we see on the street all the time. It doesn't necessarily mean that it's always going to work. So what is that inspiration that you can do, slight tweak for existing content to bring this onto something that could work specifically for individual brands. Oops.
Mm.
Yeah.
No, we're good. I mean, we can stick to this slide. But yeah, I think once you kind of have this concept or this idea that's your starting point, I always like, yeah, the next step is to think about how does this translate on screen? Like, what's the format? And so for me, something I like to kind of incorporate into my creative process is looking at how other people have done it first. Even if I already know, okay, I want to do on the street, like that's pretty self-explanatory. I always go and have a look at how have other people done this, or how have other people filmed this format, and how have they done it differently? Because I think even if you know in the back of your mind how you want to film it, it may just kind of trigger a spin-off idea, or someone maybe filmed the hook of their video a little differently to how you would have, and that gives you an extra idea or something new to test. But I think it also gives you the opportunity to understand what kind of existing content is out there that your audience is either really responding to. So maybe there are some other bars out there doing a similar thing. Like, how are they doing it? Are people liking it, or are they just not interested? Because then you can, again, maybe you need to adjust, or maybe it's like, okay, they're filming it the same way I would have. So now I need to do it a bit differently because, you know, it's just not resonating with the audience very well. So yeah, I guess my top tip for this would be, I always just like to follow as many brands, creators, community pages even, that are posting interesting content. I'm sure everyone loves to do that. That's not like a revolutionary idea. But any kind of video that I see on my For You page that I find interesting or entertaining or inspiring, or maybe it's even educational, I'll always save it so that I can come back to it at a later date. Because I think what you'll find is, even if it's something that's come from like a creator and it's maybe not immediately obvious that it could be applied to a brand, these content styles or these really fun ideas are almost always adaptable to any niche. So on this slide, I really wanted to use the example of this pick a card concept, which I'm not sure if anyone's seen, but I think maybe my partner sent it to me and he was like, oh, we should try this. And it's essentially where you like present two choices for like a date night to do with your partner, and whatever they choose, like that's what you go away and do. And I was like, oh, okay, I like this. And then after a couple of weeks, I saw some like hairdressers doing it, and they were like presenting maybe two color options or two cut options to their clients. And again, whatever they picked, like that's the hairstyle that they would give them. And I was like, okay, so now brands are doing this, or businesses are doing this. And we work with Interflora, who's like a florist brand. And I thought, what if we do this with florists and we present them like two flower options or like two bouquet style options? And then whatever they pick, they have to go away and create and turn it into a bit of a challenge. And I think that turns a really simple idea of like, let's get the florist to build bouquets because that's what they're good at, into something that's a little bit more engaging and a little bit more exciting, where people, they want to stick around to the end of the video and see how the bouquet turned out. And maybe they love it and they're like, oh my goodness, like I'm obsessed. And maybe they don't. And maybe we apply it to like brides who are getting married this year, or maybe we apply it to men who are looking for like Valentine's Day inspiration. So again, like that concept then becomes a little bit more scalable, and you can sort of grow it as you've seen it.
Absolutely. I love that. And I think there's something to say, because everybody wants to be unique. Everybody wants to stand out on the platform. That's how you're going to get cut through ultimately. But TikTok is built on trends and people's different iterations of a certain trend. And that applies to brands as well. So while we're saying, yes, break the logic, go a little bit different, we're not necessarily saying reinvent the wheel. We're just saying add your own spin. While you might end up in a specific style that isn't completely brand new to the platform or elsewhere, this approach, your approach to this is new. It should be something that you probably have never done before as a brand. It should be something that potentially your competitors are not doing, but it doesn't need to be something that doesn't exist already. So don't get into this like mindset that, oh, it's already been done, we can't do it because we need to be completely different. It's, what is your spin? Because just like people are going on TikTok to jump on trends, you're using all the same sounds, maybe you're lip syncing, but the transitions are different, your outfits are different. It's, TikTok is about pulling out your own personality, and that applies to brands as well. TikTok is a person-to-person platform. So what is that personality behind your brand that can make this trend feel a little bit different? Make it feel like you are actually, as a brand, injecting personality into it, rather than just slapping a logo on something, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
We do have a question before we move on from James. And just a reminder, everybody, if you have questions, please use the Q&A. I saw some questions in the chat, but we obviously did the exercise, so some of them got pushed up. So please just use the Q&A so we can keep an eye on it. But right now we have a question from James for how do you approach the sensitive nature of highly regulated sectors like potentially finance or insurance? Do you have any ideas on that one?
Yeah, I mean, in the sense that like there are lots of things that you can't talk about, maybe, or there's lots like you get the legal, like this is not financial advice type
Yeah.
thing. Yeah, I
Yes.
mean, again, I kind of just go back to like what's relatable to that audience. Like maybe you don't even talk about finance. Like maybe you're not giving that advice and therefore it's not flagged. Like if we look at the I'm looking for a man in finance trend, which has just been everywhere, like that's something that I'm sure you could jump on quite easily that would be a little bit more brand safe. Or maybe, I mean, I don't work in finance or legal, but I see calls all the time between like the legal department and then the crazy marketing department where they want to do all these insane ideas and legal's like, dear God, no, please. Like that's something that's maybe really relatable to your audience where you're not necessarily speaking about all of these topics where there's lots of sort of red tape and you have to be kind of careful, but instead you're talking about the lifestyle and things that are super relatable and symbolic to that audience. I don't know. What do you think, Melina?
Yeah, absolutely. I completely agree. I think there's something in saying like there are different ways to approach TikTok. From an organic perspective, it's really important to follow what Chloe's kind of laid out here. Organic is only going to land if somebody finds it entertaining or relatable or etc. Something along the lines of you see it and as a person you relate to it. There's also paid where if you need to go into a little bit more of like the nitty-gritty of the financial terms and stuff like that, and you can include text on there with the disclaimers, that's the word. You can do that, but that would not work organically. Honestly, it would not. So from an organic perspective, you need to think about these relatable pain points. Maybe it's not pain points, maybe it's a joy point. I'm going to coin that term right now. But essentially, what you want to do is play into what everybody can relate to from underneath that finance umbrella. So we work with quite a few actually finance or insurance brands. And what we do is we understand who the audience is, and then we narrow it down to a talk. We've talked about talks on some of our previous webinars. We'll link it in the email that we sent before that goes into a little bit more detail about what a talk is and how to find it. But for example, we work with a brand that is like a insurance aggregator. So they can't necessarily give advice anyway because they're not the provider, they're an aggregator. But they do need to talk about what it's like when you are growing up and you need to take these more important decisions, like in terms of life insurance, for example, like the importance of having that might go over some people's heads. So with that one, we really narrowed it down to like the common pain point for their audience is growing up. Like you are as somebody younger, you're not really thinking about these insurance policies. You're not thinking about how that's going to help you. But as you grow up, it becomes more and more important. So that act of growing up, that act of adulting is a common pain point for anybody who's considering different insurance options. And that is what we tried to hone in on when we came to an organic perspective. Again, paid can do different things. Paid can drive people to your website. Influencer can give that more like tip-based content from somebody who is not speaking about their brand specifically. But as a brand, if you want to connect with your audience, you have to tap into some of the things that the audience is finding relatable, enjoyable, etc. I hope that helps. We had a couple of other questions. One of them is specific to the example that we showed for the cocktail club about
Mhm.
going out on the street. So, how do you get the public to get involved? Because ultimately you're stopping random people, right? So how do you get them to participate? And is there anything from a consent perspective that needs to be considered?
Yeah, that's a really good question, actually, because I think that street interviews are a lot harder than they appear. And I think the challenge with them is that you're very reliant on getting good responses, right? Like you could interview the most boring person ever and they give the most vanilla response, and you can post it, but it's probably not going to do very well because it's not like super engaging. But I think a couple of things to consider definitely would be location. Where you're filming is super important because it almost dictates the type of people you want to be interviewing. So I guess it depends on what your audience demographic is, and you need to consider, like, somewhere we filmed recently in Brick Lane in London, and everyone there is like the coolest person I've ever met. Like, I think I'm quite trendy, and then I went to Brick Lane and I was like, oh my gosh, I am the lamest person alive.
Nope,
So
you are trendy. I'll just say that. But anyways, go on.
I wasn't fishing, but thank you. So I think that's a really big thing to consider. Consent is another big one. Best practice for us is either to have written consent forms printed out that you can get people to sign. Something that's a little bit quicker and easier to do when you're out and about and you can't necessarily hold a lot of consent forms is you're recording them anyway. So we always like to capture their consent. We ask them for their name and just to like verbally agree that they're happy to be in the video. And then we save all of those consent videos into a folder so that we've got them on hand in case anyone, has any issues or comes back to us afterwards. But I really do think it's a patience game. Like, you could only need one video and you could be out there all day. And I am of a big believer of being really picky. Like, obviously we don't like to judge people based on like their appearance or their age or whatever. But if you know what your target audience is and you're trying to speak to maybe women in their 30s, you're probably not going to stop a like 18-year-old guy just because he's the only one on the street. Like, that's just not going to resonate well with your audience. So I think pick a spot where you can people watch, take your time, wait for people are going to be good. But I also think in terms of like interviewing them and getting them excited and involved in it, explain what you're doing. First of all, like, when you come up with a camera in your face, or like, again, when you mention TikTok, some people are very reserved, but maybe they have some affinity to the brand or the questions that you're going to be asking. So if you can provide them as much detail up front, I think it just makes them feel a lot more comfortable than, we're going to ask you some questions, but I'm not going to tell you what they are until like we start rolling the camera. Like, that would scare me, and I even work in the industry. So I think that's really important. And the energy you bring as well as a presenter, like, they're going to give the same energy that you are. People bounce off each other. If you're like, come up to them and you're really shy, or you're kind of like being a bit weird about it, then they're going to be a little bit off put. So I think those would be the main things I would say to consider.
Yeah, I think the only other thing I would add is getting filming permissions in certain locations. I don't know if you mentioned that, but I think where you went, you didn't need one, but there are some areas in London, around the UK, that you do need filming permissions from the
Yes.
council itself. So just do a quick Google search before you go out in public, especially if you are filming from a brand account. I think if you're filming as just a general creator, it doesn't apply. But as a brand, as a business, you might need to kind of check those things. So just do a quick Google search about where you're going and whether or not you need filming permissions. And it's generally really easy to do. You just fill out a form, you send it off, and you get approval. But that's just another consideration if you are filming in public. Amazing. So we have a couple more slides, but one of the things that we've gotten a few times on some of our other webinars was how a small team can approach creating content for TikTok, because ultimately TikTok is about consistency, posting often, and kind of keeping up this like appearance on the platform, because the last thing you want to do is post and ghost and we never see you again. So how do you recommend a smaller team approaching this scalable and consistent, always on organic TikTok presence?
Yeah, it's a really good question, and you've kind of already answered it. I guess the easy answer is you always want to make sure that whatever your idea is, it's super scalable, right? That you can keep it up consistently and you can keep coming back to it, because you don't want to go like all in the first month of your TikTok journey and then just disappear because you couldn't maintain that. So I've kind of outlined a few tips that I have had, and Melina, please feel free to jump in with any additional points. But I think the first thing to think about is your format. And this is where the scalability comes into it, because things like on the street interviews or podcasts, for example, they're really resource heavy, especially if you're a small team. Like you need a lot of equipment, like microphones and lighting. You need a lot of time, especially for on the streets. You also kind of just need the balls to like go out and ask people to be in their TikTok, which I know like some people just don't want to be in front of the camera or don't feel comfortable putting themselves out there, which is absolutely fine. So have a think about what are those formats. Maybe it's a carousel, or maybe it's like narrated videos that don't require as much time or effort or technical skill, because like a carousel, all you need is an image and I don't know, a witty caption, and you can like really scale those up and like put together a few at a time that you've got saved for the next couple of weeks, right? The same with narrated videos. All you need is those B-roll clips and then just, you know, a spare 5 minutes to record that narration. I guess the next thing that comes onto that kind of goes hand in hand is, can you turn your concept into a series? This is something that our Chief Content Officer, Sam, is like always drilling into us. In fact, I've heard it from him this week already. Where's part 2? Where's part 3? Where's part 4? Especially if it's like a really successful concept that you've tried. Create as many parts as possible and turn it into a series on the account. I think a really good example of this is Flowerville Library. If anyone follows them on TikTok, they do these like 1-star book reviews where they just like read out a 1-star review and ask their audience to guess the book, and then at the end they reveal it. If you think about it, there's only 2 girls that do it. All they would require is like a tripod and a microphone and a book, which fortunately for them, they work in a library. And, you know, they've got like 100 books in their library. So already that's 100 parts that they could create for their series. All they need to do is like find that 1-star review and record the video. So think about, you know, how scalable and can you turn it into a series? And then when you're on your shoots, when you get to that production stage, try and capture your content in bulk. So when we film for Interflora, we obviously film with a lot of like flowers, which are just beautiful and like really visually engaging. So what we'll do is we'll start taking like 10 to 20 photos on every shoot that we can then save for like a trend that comes around, or a carousel where we can feature these really beautiful bouquets. Likewise with on the street shoots, I mentioned it before, if you stop one person, have 5 questions prepared so that that one person you interviewed, at least if the answers are good, you've got 5 videos that you can then like take away from that. I think the only caveat there obviously is like quality is always better than quantity, and you don't want to just be like, you know, asking these questions or taking these photos if they're not good. I think you really kind of need to be a bit honest with yourself of like, okay, is this actually good content, or have I just, you know, filmed it because I could or I needed to? But yeah, definitely capture your content in bulk so that you can bank it for the future and repurpose at a later date, for sure.
Amazing. So we had a question, and I think it kind of builds well on some of this. So maybe it's not necessarily small team specific, but when we are building like these scalable ideas, if we go back to one of the examples that you showed for Interflora with like the cards and something challenge based, one of the questions we got was, how do you make these challenges interesting for the community and make them comment and stay until the end of the video? So what are some tips you can give to keep them coming back, engaging, and watching the entire thing?
Oh my goodness, that's a really good question. I think one of the most important things is I love, yeah, like a challenge video or a quiz video, because I think the nature of it in itself invites audience participation and invites engagement. I think people are kind of know-it-alls, especially online. You get like keyboard warriors who want to prove to everyone that like they're the smartest. So I think if you invite a question in whatever that content is. So like in the case of the cocktail club, it was like, do you know what this logo is, or what brand this logo belongs to? Or with Interflora, it's like, can you build a bouquet without seeing the design first? That is like the initial intrigue hook that immediately invites the user to watch it through to the end for that payoff, either to see if someone got it right or to see what this bouquet turned out like. So I guess that really, really helps with like the watch time and getting people to watch the end. It's like keeping the payoff towards the end if you can. And then I think for the engagement factor is, yeah, like weave those questions in there. For our Interflora videos, we always had at the end, like, who would you give this to? Or how did we do? Or do you like this bouquet? Those are like really basic examples. I'd have to workshop them. But like questions like that, that is almost that call to action of like comment below, right? Like, what do you think? And then again, with the cocktail club, it was just people getting the answer wrong. Just something about it. Everyone was like, are you stupid? Like, I can't believe you didn't know that. So off the top of my head, those would be the two biggest pointers. But I don't know if you've got anything to add, Melina.
Um, I I mean, I think you nailed it. There is an element of controversy that always works, just like what you said. It's like getting it wrong could be controversial. Like you don't necessarily need to be provoking anybody, but like if you put something in there that you know that the audience is particularly going to pick up on as wrong, that is something that people will go to the comment section and say, oh my gosh, I can't believe you just said that, like whatever it might be. So for example, one of the ideas that we had recently that we weren't able to do was filming some type of Zoom call, but from a third party perspective. And what we wanted to do is have the meeting happen, but then they were watching like a Disney movie in the background. Like that alone is saying, okay, that's relatable. I mean, not relatable to me if my bosses are watching. I pay full attention in all of my meetings, but that's relatable to some people that aren't me, that have a lot of things happening in the background, especially from a work from home environment. So just having that, you know that people are going to be in the comments saying like, haha, I can't believe that person's watching Tangled. Like if only they knew that he was watching Tangled, etc. And Tangled is one of my favorite Disney movies, which is why that's the example. So any little things that you can start to incorporate like that will automatically get people to either laugh, engage, whatever it might be. And that keeps them watching throughout as well because they're automatically just a little bit more invested, I would say.
Mm.
Um, Anything you would add to that?
Well, it just made me think. I mean, we've got these examples from Twycross Zoo up on the screen. And Adam, if you're here, hello, welcome. But we basically at Twycross Zoo, they have this chimpanzee called Jambo, and he has a genetic condition called alopecia, which means that he's like lost all the hair on his body. And I didn't know that this chimp existed, but by chance, in one of the videos we had filmed, he was in the background, and I don't know how I didn't catch him, but he appeared in the background as this sort of pink gangly figure. And every single comment on the video had nothing to do with him, was like, what is that pink thing in the background of this video? And I was like, oh my goodness, okay, what is that pink thing? So we worked with the zoo and I was like, who is this? And they explained Jambo and like who he was and his condition. And he's a bit of an icon. If you've seen him, if you know, you know. And what we were able to do then is like almost pre-plan some content where Jambo would appear in the background because we knew most people were immediately drawn to him. So it's kind of the same thing as what you were saying with having Tangled in the background of this video that we filmed, where everyone was like, is he watching Tangled? Or I've seen people that like flash up something really controversial, like a tiny baggie, like on in their videos, for example, where everyone's like, did anyone else just see that? So yeah, it's like creating these attention triggers or like saying something that's maybe like pronouncing something wrong. I saw this chef on TikTok where he pronounced like prosciutto or something like that, and everyone was just roasting him in the comments. But I was like, that is so smart because he's doing it on purpose to like generate this engagement. So I think there's an element of that as well. If you want to get like a bit risky and a bit playful with your content, you can almost like stage these moments.
Absolutely. I love that. Little Easter eggs. It just keeps people coming back.
Yes.
Um, we have a question here about like cadence. I guess this kind of builds on quality over quantity. Is there anything you would recommend from a posting schedule perspective? Like, do you opt to see, do you think that consistency can mean 2 times a week, or does it need to be daily? How would
Mm.
you kind of approach that?
Yeah, this is such an interesting question because I think everyone you ask is going to say something different, but I am a big believer in whatever is manageable for you. Like show up in a way that's manageable, and consistency means something different to everyone. So if you are really short on time, but you want to be on TikTok and you know your audience is there, maybe you are posting once a week. Like maybe that's all you give yourself time for, but those videos are like really high production, or it's like a really good concept. Or maybe you want to show up 5 times a week, but you just want to be posting trends. So I think whatever's manageable for you is more important than anything, really, because you can set yourself a goal of like, I'm going to post 3 times a day because the TikTok gurus told me that's effective. If you can't actually maintain that, then like you're going to drop off after a day probably. So it's like smart goals, isn't it? Like, is it manageable?
Absolutely. So at the end of this question, it's like, do we recommend going for stronger content more sporadically? I don't think sporadically is the right way to approach this. If you need to spread it out, fine, but stick to it. So even if it's one time a week, be consistent with that one time a week, with strong content. So the last thing we want you to do, as I kind of mentioned, is like that posting and ghosting. It's like you just post and then we don't hear from you for a couple weeks, whatever it might be. So consistency means something different to everybody. I think that's a really great takeaway for that, but consistency is important. So you set your own schedule, you set your own timeline, and go from there based on what you're able to keep up.
Absolutely.
Amazing. Um, we have a little bit more here about, oops, sorry. When we are looking at something from a brand perspective, a lot of times they want to be brand safe, right? So they have their own like mentality that they need to get around. It's like, oh, I don't know, that's a little bit risky for us, or maybe that's a bit too creative. Maybe not creative is the right word, but that there's an element of brand safety that every single business needs to consider when they join TikTok or when they join any platform, really. And some brands are going to be able to be a little bit more explorative. I don't know if that's a word, but they're going to be able to explore a bit more, while others, like let's say the insurance brands, etc., may not be able to. So is there an element of still being able to be creative in these more strict brand safe businesses?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. We know, I mean, our head of TikTok, Nat, she always says that like it's a journey and it's a process of like working with your clients. And maybe it's like 50% of your content is what they want to post, and 50% of your content is what you want to post. And you almost have to like measure it up that way. Like some brands just, yeah, they don't necessarily understand it. But I know a lot of us know that like people on TikTok, they want to see content that's been made for them. They're not really interested in seeing something that's being posted on every other channel and it's just like been cross-posted there without second thought. And we know that like TikTok trends in particular, like they have a lifespan of about 8 hours sometimes. So if you're going to have to get layers of approval, it can mean all the difference between going viral and like completely missing the boat. So again, I've got a couple of tips. I think it's the slide after the next one, Melina, of how we can kind of work around that a little bit more easily. And my first one feels very obvious, but pre-plan as much as possible. We know when there are big cultural events in the calendar, right? So if you think about the Met Gala is the first Monday of every May, or like Bridgerton coming out, we know Netflix like kind of promotes that as far in advance as possible. Even things like the general election, which we now know is coming up, and I can't remember which one of the parties is like massive on TikTok right now, but there are things in the calendar that we can kind of earmark in advance so that we have time to prep for these. So the Met Gala, for example, you could create some templates or even brainstorm some formats ahead of time. Every year without fail, there's like a picture that comes out where everyone like slaps their little like me, my screen time, like meme templates like that. So have a think about if there are any of those pain points that we talked about, or maybe like some jokes or memes that you can plan in advance and get those signed off with your boss or with your clients and really take them through to explain it. That way, when the images come out, and we won't know what they are, but they always inevitably come out, you can then just pop those jokes on there and all you have to get signed off is the image. I don't know if that makes sense. I didn't explain that very well, but definitely where you can just like plan in advance as much as possible. And I think two other sort of avenues that not a lot of people consider, and granted, not everyone has the resource for this, but I really wanted to include it, is working with creators, taking the Adidas approach, as I like to call it, this image here. They basically work with their influencer team to get native content out as quick as possible, because they're a huge brand. So they have to go through like legal, and they have to go through like the head of marketing before they can post anything. And often that means missing the boat. So anytime like a big trend comes around, what they tend to do is they brief in influencers and creators to take part in that trend, but wear something branded or like wear some Adidas sneakers. That way, Adidas is like at the forefront of that content, even though it's not them who are posting it. So this example was like the Wes Anderson trend, and they commented on a creator's video being like, don't turn us into a film. And then their creator made that Wes Anderson video, but he was wearing Adidas. And so, you know, you've got the reply to comment there with the brand, and then he's wearing all Adidas. So they were able to like take part in this cultural moment without actually having to take part. And then yeah, the other avenue is paid media, right? Like don't sleep on it. I think your organic feed should be for these original and authentic content ideas. And then you can always pitch to your bosses or your clients or whoever it is that paid channels can be the home to this branded content and this branded messaging. And if there's a product that you have to push, or if there's a line that you have to toe that you know is just not, it's not even worth being on TikTok for, because it's not going to work organically. Try and see if you can do that through like dark ads or in-feed ads, or as a very, very kind of meet halfway thing, post content onto your organic feed with the sole intention of sparking it and like boosting it and putting some paid behind it, so that even though it's not going to perform well organically, it still shows up on the feed, but it just gets boosted out to the right audience, and therefore like the numbers are kind of there if it's more of a vanity thing. So I don't know if you would have anything to add, Melina.
Nothing to that, but we did just get a question about paid media specifically. Charlotte asked if it impacts organic performance at all. And I would just say, if you do dark ads, absolutely not. It's fully separate. It does not impact your organic performance. What might impact, and it's not always a guarantee, is if you're sparking everything. If you're posting and you're sparking everything, organically, it might not take off because TikTok starts to learn, it's like, oh, well, we don't need to push this because you're going to put money behind it. And they just kind of wait for that. So what we do from a sparking perspective, because dark ads, again, completely separate, that is for the sole purpose of using paid media to push it out. But from a spark ad perspective, we like to post things that we know are going to work organically, or at least we hope. We think it's going to be a really strong organic piece, and then we wait a little bit to see if it's getting the engagement that we're hoping for. If it's showing some promise, then we spark it. The last thing we want to do is spark it before it has any ability to kind of test out. 1 second, Dale, I'll answer that in a second. Sorry about that. The last thing we want to do is spark it right away, because it just doesn't give TikTok the time to learn. It doesn't give TikTok the time to understand, oh, this is working organically. So we can continue to show it to our audiences, because from an organic perspective, it's engaging. So when you spark, we just say, wait a little bit, see if it's working, see if you think that the engagement rate will stay in line with the amount of views that you're paying for. Because one of the dead giveaways, like if you open an account and you see this has 1 million views, but then it only has like 1,000 likes, that's most likely been sparked. And it's not really getting the cut through that you want, because that 1 million views is somebody scrolling right past it on TikTok. So when you have that really strong, engaging video that you post organically and it's working a little bit already, that spark will just take it to the next level. It will just open up new audiences for you, but that engagement should still remain strong. I hope that helps. Now answering Dale's question, just in case this applies to anybody else, the difference between spark ads and dark ads. A dark ad is something that exists in the ether. So if you go into your organic page and you look at everything that you've posted organically, a dark ad will not show up. A dark ad is just pushed out to people's For You pages, and it is all managed from the ads manager. A spark ad is something that you post organically first, and then you put money behind it. So it's probably the equivalent to Meta's boosting, but there is a little bit more actionable things that you can do with a spark ad than you could on Meta. That you can basically turn it into a full-fledged ad with all the different targeting capabilities, whereas boosting on Meta, you just kind of give it a little boost. But spark ads turn it into an actual ad, but you can see it on somebody's organic page. I hope that helps. Amazing. So we did have a couple other questions here about the use of, like, from a brand's perspective, the use of licensed music or trending music. Obviously, as a business account, you lose access to some of those. So is there anything you would recommend? Is there a way to get around it, or how would you approach this?
Yeah, I think this is like such a pain point for so many brands. It's so annoying. But I think there are a couple ways around it, some which are not probably recommended by TikTok, but they are like, I don't know, practices that we sometimes do. But if anyone asks, no, we don't. The first is either that you can there are lots of sort of like remixed, like reverbed or sped up or slowed down versions of trending sounds that a lot of brands or creators tend to turn to in events where something's blown up. So like Sabrina Carpenter's Espresso song was like everywhere at one point. And so a lot of people create like sped up versions that are available for brands to use. So that's one option. And because so many people like can't use the real version, those kind of remix sounds tend to blow up as well. So they're just as effective in terms of like jumping on something that has a bit of momentum behind it to build momentum on your video. That's one way around it. A second way that I think is really creative, but is again not always applicable, is like recreate the sound as a brand. And again, like some people, we have Taylor, a content producer on our team, who's just like a musician anyway, so he can really quickly whip up like parodied versions or like, I don't know, branded versions of songs. But a good example was that punching trend a few weeks ago where it was like duh, 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 duh. And a lot of brands like weren't able to access that. And so one account, they did what I just did, and they just like hummed the sound in their video. And that went really viral because their caption was like, we can't use this licensed sound, so here's a brand safe version for everyone. And so then all the brands like flocked to that, and they in turn like created a viral sound for themselves, which like really helped with their brand reach. So those are a couple creative ways. One sneaky way is always to like add the sound on like a third party app like CapCut, for example, and then upload it to TikTok, and you can then it sort of appears that way. But that's like a little bit more on the sketchy side.
Yes. Yeah, I think it's worth a try. But TikTok is very much a test and learn platform. I think we get into the mindset, it's like what goes up there lives forever. And while it does, it's a blip in the radar. There's so many different people posting all the time. So if you post a flop, it's not gonna be the end of the world, but test it, see, because it might be the thing that kind of takes you guys to the next level. We did have a question specifically about if it needs to be a business account if you're not making money or selling products, and absolutely, it does not. It does not need to be a business account. So that's another thing that we say. If your brand's account does not need to be a business account, turn it on to creator, get access to all the sounds. If from, and I think also, because you can't even add your link into the bio until you reach about 1,000 followers anyway. So use that like initial starting point to use all the creative sounds that you can. And then when you get bigger, and then when you want to start driving people to your website, then you can turn it into a business account. But you ultimately, you do not need to do that if you're not linking products, if you're not selling anything. If you are doing it more from a community perspective, it does not need to be a business account. We have a couple of things here. So ultimately, being creative can be a bit of a task. It can be difficult to think outside the box. And recently, AI has been becoming more and more popular. And I know we use this internally. We're trying to formalize some processes around this. But is there anything that you would say specifically about how you can use AI in content creation?
Yeah, 100%. This is like a really exciting area because if you had asked me like literally before I started at Nonsensical, I didn't want to touch ChatGPT. I was like, I can do it on my own. Like I don't need help from AI. But now I try and incorporate it into my workflow as often as possible. But I think one of the important things to remember with ChatGPT is it is really good at throwing you lots of suggestions, but your role then is to play editor, right? Whatever, it's not the start, like it's not your idea, it's the starting point. And the problem with ChatGPT is it often doesn't like break the logic, like we said at the start of this webinar, right? So Your job there is to take the most common answers that it gives you, because it's going to give you the answer that you could, the safest answer, and then kind of go in and turn it into a final product. So it's a starting point, it's a sounding board, but it is not an ideas generator. So what we've included in this deck, which we will be sharing after the presentation, are some of my personal favorite prompts for working smarter with AI. And I did not come up with these. I will not claim this. I've linked Dash Hudson, have a really, really helpful template. It's a huge spreadsheet filled with more prompts than this. So if these are speaking to you and you are interested, it is linked in this slide here. But a couple of ways that you can use it. One is to repurpose content. So you can tell ChatGPT what you want to repurpose and what for. So maybe you want to repurpose a video about being a content creator into 2 new videos. You can ask ChatGPT, like, how would they create variations of this content? If you're looking for inspiration, ChatGPT can show you the best accounts and creators to follow in the industry. So if you say, I'm in the beauty industry, I want to follow the best creators on TikTok, can you generate me a list, and give it kind of prompts around, I want their followers to look like this or whatever. It can generally give you that. And my newest favorite use of ChatGPT is for community management, because sometimes you can't think of a witty response fast enough and you don't want to leave someone hanging. But I work with some clients where they have like a very kind of like dry, witty tone of voice, and like they're up for having a bit of banter with their people in the comments. So you can also kind of feed the comment that you've received into ChatGPT and ask it to generate a response from the perspective of a social media manager. Something else really fun you can do, and I've included an example of the next slide, is you can ask ChatGPT to pretend to be someone. So in this instance, I was trying to be like a toxic manager responding to people. And I was like, act like you're Ricky Gervais, or act like you're Ricky Gervais from The Office. Write me 10 one-liners from a toxic manager at a digital marketing agency. And then you can even add the comment that you've received in there. And what it will do, and as you can see from the image, it fed me some are not great, okay, I will say that, but it's your job to take it away and finesse it. But some of them are really good, and they're ideas that I myself would have never thought of. So that's one of my personal favorite ways of using ChatGPT, and there are hundreds of others. So I definitely recommend checking out that spreadsheet from Dash Hudson, because it's really changed my life.
Love it. We did get one specific AI question about whether or not you can teach it tone of voice. And yes, you can. The more you give the AI, the more it will learn. So what you can do is take something that you think is the perfect tone of voice for you, like maybe you wrote something previously and it sounds exactly on brand. You put that in, then you put the prompt, and then you say, answer this prompt in the tone of voice in the example I gave you earlier. So the more you feed it, the better it learns and the more it can help you along the way. We are running out of time. We have 3 minutes left. So I'm going to do some quick fire questions from what has come across. How do you get some of the team, sorry. How do you get some of the team members to get involved, be silly, and have fun?
Oh man, see, we're so fortunate because like everyone that works at Nonsensical, like that's our job. Like we are here to create TikTok. So everyone's like really up for it and willing to get involved. But I think it's kind of like what I said with on the streets. Just explain it to them. Like some people have all these preconceived notions around TikTok. They think it's somewhere to dance and, like throw a whip in a nay or whatever else. Just like sit them down, explain what the idea is and what you need them to do. And more often than not, I think you'll find that like people like at first reserve, but then find a little bit more willingness. I think it also really helps to show them like your TikTok page. If you're trying to get people who have nothing to do with your brand or, your client's TikTok, sometimes just showing them the videos, and particularly if they've been really successful or really positively received, it's just kind of about putting their mind at ease and being like, this is what we're doing. Look at how well it's responded. People love it when we do this type thing. I think you can try and convince them a little bit more, but ultimately we can't force anyone to be in front of the camera if they're not interested. So maybe you just want to use them for their ideas and be like, hey, we're doing this trend. what's your take on it? Or like, what do you think would be funny? Um, sorry, I'm trying to keep my responses quick.
No, all good. And I would just add to that, it's a bit of herd mentality. So once people start to do it and it takes off, people are more likely to want to get involved because they don't want to miss out on all the fun that's being had. We had a couple other questions about how to get clients that are scared of TikTok on there. And ultimately, it's just a test and learn platform. So test something that they're comfortable with at first and gradually start to change into some of these more unhinged things if that's something that they want to get to in the end. I'm really sorry, guys. We only have a minute left. So I'm going to end the Q&A section there. We had a couple more slides to go through, but we will send it through. The next couple bits are just about how to use the community to generate innovative content. So basically, how can you get some inspiration from what's being commented on your videos and things like that and help that spur ideas. But we will send that across. Maybe we'll do a part 2 because, you know, it's all about scalable content and we can build this into the next one. So please, when I send over the email to you guys tomorrow with the slides and the recording, please follow up with that with questions, or if you want a part 2, because we will absolutely do it for you. So sorry that we're running out of time. Thank you everybody so much for joining. Thank you, Chloe, for your time today. You've been immense and we love you all. And
Yeah.
hopefully we'll see you next month.
Thank you so much, guys. And don't hesitate to reach out on LinkedIn with any questions. I'm happy to answer them.
Yes, thank you guys so much. We'll see you guys soon. Bye.